I think I want to just begin by saying my name is Marsha Tansey. That's the name that I went to Vietnam with. I served as a nurse in the intensive care recovery room at the 18th Surgical Hospital, first at Camp Evans and then at Quan Tri, which is way up in northern I Corps. I was intensive care recovery, as I stated, but I was also an emergency room nurse when I was off duty. Coming home was something we waited for and marked off on a calendar every day for 365 days. And it was when you became a short-timer that you started really allowing yourself to think about going home. And the closer I got, the harder it seemed to accept the fact that I was not going to be here any longer. This was my home for a very long time. And I knew when I left, I probably was not going to see ever again some of the people that were most important in my entire life to me. And it was a painful experience, and I had a lot of ambiguous feelings about it. But also commented earlier was the fact that you're here one day and you're there the next. And you go home and you go into your family's home with your brothers and sisters. I had 5 brothers and a sister at the time. They were all home and much younger than I was. And I spent the first week up in a bedroom because eating at the kitchen table with all the confusion of 3 and 4 and 8-year-olds was more than I could handle. And my mother took me to the doctor, and she said there's something wrong with her. And I really didn't know what she was talking about. And the doctor said, I'm not going to give her any drugs. So I went home, back to my room. And a couple days later, a friend of mine came by the house with a van. This was a person I had served with at the hospital, and he said, come on, get in, we're going on a trip. My parents disowned me because I was jumping in a van to go around the country, in my father's words, like a hobo, and God forbid, with a man I wasn't married to. And I was gone for about 6 months. And we lived in a tent on the ground, and we traveled the West. We met some amazing people. And, excuse me, I ended up down in Southern California with no money. I couldn't go home. And so I lived in the desert for a while. So life went on. And while I was down in Southern California, I ran into a girl I was in nurses training with, and I went to her because I wanted to borrow some money so that I could get some food. And she wouldn't give me any money. And I was so taken back, I was so hurt that this woman who was my friend wouldn't give me any money. And I began to wonder why. And the last thing she said to me was, what are you running away from? It really took me back, and I thought, oh, no, you're wrong. I just needed to take a vacation. And life moved on. Eventually, I got married and did what you do. You have children, you raise children. And in 1987, thanks to Grace Kim Q. Moore, she introduced me to the Vietnam Women's Memorial Project at the time. And she was actually speaking about it at a Vietnam Veterans of America chapter meeting. And that's how I got hooked into my service organization, Vietnam Veterans of America, but it's also how I got hooked into being a volunteer for the Vietnam Women's Memorial in 1987. I have, since that time, only worked with veterans, mostly on a one-to-one basis. I worked most particularly with homeless veterans and women veterans. And I always have to kid about it, because when someone asks me, oh, how did you get into all this? I said, this is how I handle my PTSD. And it's a joke in a way, but it's not a joke in another way. This is my life. You know, Vietnam made me who I am today. Made most of us who we are today. We grew up in Vietnam. That's where we became adults. I went to Vietnam as a real simple Catholic girl from all Catholic girls' schools in the Midwest. And I didn't know a thing about life. But I didn't come home a simple girl. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized I came home a very angry woman. I was pissed off. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. Why was I always ready to fight? But I found a place to fight. That was the blessed thing about it. And so since 1987, really, I've been fighting for the rights of veterans with legislation. Inside, I don't work for the VA, but inside the VA, there are people that I know. And there are things that we realized when we came home that weren't right. We women veterans basically had nothing at the VA. But because of who we were and what war did to us, and what the times did to us, you know, we grew up in post-World War II with our parents, but we grew up in war from an environment here in this country that was going through such a tremendous cultural evolution, and some would say cultural revolution, that we grabbed a hold of that. It was made for us, actually, at the time. We were ready to take up the sword and let's go, girls. And we did. And we demanded care and treatment and benefits that were never made for us. And because of that fight, because of what we did, and in many cases, with all you guys standing right beside us, arm in arm, there's an advisory committee for women veterans at the VA now. There's a center for women veterans at the VA now. There's a national health care department in the VA now for women. There are women veterans clinics throughout the country now. There are specialists that know about women veterans in the VA now. And this is because we all took up the sword. We all knew there was inequity, inequality. And that has now also filtered over into the military, Department of Defense. So, you know, we have really made a tremendous difference. We've been marching along this way through time, and all those women from the past have been pushing each other forward, forward, forward. And then they got to us, and they pushed us forward. And now we're pushing all the women ahead of us forward. And it will be their job to keep pushing ahead again. And we all understand the message. And we all understand the duty and responsibility we have to each other. And part of what happened then was an understanding that this area would not be complete without the Vietnam Women's Memorial. And this was another issue to take up the sword on. And if you have not heard about the fight that went through to get this beautiful statue here, you must find out. It was a very long process. There were injuries along the way. There was sadness along the way. But we knew this was right. And we did not give up the fight. We never give up the fight. Look around you. Look at what you've done with your lives. It's all been about the fight. Take up the sword. Make it right. And so I thank Diane for never losing the message offside. And I thank you all allowing the world to know what this memorial does in the completion of the circle of this arena. It completes it. And what this does, and through time, it is a picture, something that can be touched, that everyone going forward will know the cost of war. It's very visual here, and it will never be forgotten. God bless you all. Have a wonderful Veterans Day. Thank you.